nation to force our way on everybody, on people, and on the marketplace, and on foreign governments because we are such a great nation. I'll tell you what, there's a lot of great things about this country, especially in the past, about prosperity and individual liberty. But the best way to spread our exceptionalism that we have and can have is to set a good standard and make the world want to emulate us and not use force. That is one thing that has to be rejected in a free society, is the use of force. If you can force other people what to do, it is no longer a free society. Then if you grant this power to government, this use of force becomes very dangerous. And I think the rule that Bastiat gave us in the law is a very good rule. Bastiat simply said that if you and I can't do it to each other, that is, I can't take your car, I can't go into your house, I can't spy on you, the government shouldn't be allowed to do it either. We don't have to invent anything. We can improve on things. I talk so much about going to a gold standard, but I very rarely, I do say it might be careless. I don't want to go back to the gold standard. That's what we'll all be accused. You want to go back to the 19th century, back to the gold standard, back to the 19th century. I'll tell you what, they want to go back to tyranny, and we want to go to the future of liberty as well. And visiting and picking up the pieces because we were far from a perfect nation. But if we reject that and we don't advance the cause of liberty, then we lose out. I think the trial of liberty in this country was the best trial in the history of the world. And I'm afraid we're giving up on it. And it's going to have to be a generation of individuals that change our mind. We have to decide what the role of government ought to be. The founders were very clear. The role of government ought to be to protect liberty. And that was it. It wasn't to police the world or tell people how to live. It wasn't to regulate the economy. This is the reason that when I talk about being president, I talk about being president not for the things I want to do to anybody, but what I want to not do. I don't want to be the policeman of the world. I don't want to tell individuals how they should run their lives. How to run your life. And I don't want to pretend any individual knows how to run the economy. Only the people know how to run the economy and spend their own money. So what we need to do, whether it's the gold standard, the principles of liberty, our 10 amendments, we can go back and we can improve on it. One basic concept, though, that we cannot reject, and sometimes we don't talk about a lot, and that is property ownership. In a free society, the maximum amount of property should be owned by the people, not the government. Today, more than a third of our country is owned by the government and continues to increase. But if you have a corporate system, corporatism, you might not have direct ownership. But today, we don't have the direct ownership, but we have a lot of bureaucratic, political control locally and nationally, where it's really not your land anymore, and you can't do anything, you have to get permission, so true ownership doesn't exist. A lot of people worry about this and say, well, this is impossible because wouldn't this destroy the environment? Quite frankly, I don't think so at all. I don't believe that would happen. Because if you look at history and look at the movement in the last 200 or 300 years, the bigger the government, the more socialistic it is, the worse the environment was. And the basic principle that you can't harm another person, you can't take another person's property, you can't injure another person's property. You have no right to pollute anybody's air. You have no right to dump your garbage into anybody's yard. You have no right to pollute any water. And this should have been stopped during the Industrial Revolution before the corporations got together with big government and wrote laws where they did pollute, and they continue to a certain degree. I'm just convinced that the regulatory approach at the federal level to solve that problem is not the way to go. It should be done, through property ownership and this complete rejection of anybody's right to pollute somebody else's property. But the Constitution doesn't prohibit local communities to devise some regulations and rules and set some standards. So that is not ruled out. But my healthy skeptical attitude about the federal government, I don't have high hopes that that's going to work. Matter of fact, there are some people who suggested, well, the federal government isn't doing quite a good enough job on this. What we need is the United Nations taking over. We don't need another level of government. We're trying to back off from this. But here we have a time where, the Declaration of War, our president tells us he can go to the United Nations to get these declarations. No, he can't! And this is not good. But picking up the pieces of liberty and marching on is a lot easier than what the Soviets had to pray to when they broke up and individual countries did not have our traditions. Some of those countries are doing better than others. The Russians had a tough go. But if we take the best parts we have and look at it and build on it and improve on it, instead of pretending that we have to go back and live in the dark ages, this could be better than ever. And when will this, a lot of people ask, when do you think this is going to be necessary? Well, I consider the foundations of our liberties have been severely, if not completely, undermined. Our economic system is tottering because there is no sound foundation, there's no sound currency, there's nothing but debt. There's a false trust in our currency that the world will always take our printed press money. That will come to an end. And although it has been steady, in the last 100 years, the erosion of the value of our dollar went from $1 is worth about 2 cents compared to 1913. But if you study the history of money, they will destroy the value of the money, which generally means the middle class gets wiped out and wealth is turned over to a small class of people, to a minority, to the wealthy. But what happens at the end stage is the loss of confidence. And we're at that stage. The loss of confidence in the rule of law, the loss of confidence in our own government, the loss of confidence in money, and then with the breakdown of the monetary system is a real threat. So this is why I worry at times about the Department of Homeland Security when they go out and buy 500 million bullets to put into their guns. Who are they going to be shooting at is what I'd like to know. And the good understanding, economic policies are better understood today. Austrian economics in the last 100 years have made great strides. It was the Austrian economists that predicted the Depression. Mises predicted depression way back in the 20s, knowing what would happen. And certainly the Austrian economists were correct about what's happening now, whether it's a NASDAQ or the housing bubble. So we've made great strides. It's a lot better than even the free market economists of the 19th century. And now we're in the 21st century. So we have a lot to hold on to, a lot to build on. We have a lot of energy. You're part of it. Everybody who comes around to understanding this, just basically, guess what? A greater burden falls on you because you have more obligation. And believe me, the country is always moved by a small group of people. So if you're in that small group of people, you have a job to do, whether it's in this particular campaign or your campaign or getting yourselves involved in education. There's always a job. And I was taught a long time ago that if you do your job right and you learn the issues, you don't have to go searching for a job. It will come to you and people will come and you will know what you have to do. And I'm sure that will happen to many of you. So with that in mind, and with necessity now being clear, because it is the need that is so essential that has been discovered these last 4 years. I've been talking and visiting with people for 30 years on this, but there's something dramatically different in these last 4 years. It's because the economic crisis is real. Young people know what they're facing. They know that they have debt and no good jobs coming. You can't solve the problem with debt. The people in this country are sick and tired of the war. The time is right. This time is right for us to win this cause.
to be